chapter also is that is not the first thing that you do. That comes later on. And the thing that you do before that, is what's mentioned here, is that you try to combine between the two. And combining can be of different types. You can make one, for example, am, and the other khas, for example, for a specific scenario. So you could say, no, this hadith is general. However, this other hadith is for a specific situation. If it's like this, then the ruling is like this. Okay? And so on. I mean, for example, I think just a few days ago, there was a video of Sheikh Huzaifa that kind of went a bit viral. I don't know if you saw it, where the Imam Masjid Nabawi made a mistake. And Sheikh Huzaifa, more senior Imam, he was behind the Imam. And there was another person next to Sheikh Huzaifa who had a white shimar and white thawban, or khutara. And he is known as Fatih al-Imam, the one who takes the mistakes out of the Imam. So that's his job. He's been placed there to take, if an Imam makes a mistake, for him to correct. So Sheikh Huzaifa looked to see if he was there in Salah. So that's quite weird, right? We don't only move in Salah. So he looked to see if he was there, and he saw that he was there. So Imam Sheikh Huzaifa remained quiet. And there's many benefits in this. Firstly, it shows the adab of Sheikh Huzaifa, that, you know, even though he's more senior, he could have turned around and said, I'll take the mistake up. But no, he knows that somebody's been appointed, so that person will take the mistake up. And also it shows the fiqh of Sheikh Huzaifa, because that is permissible. And thirdly, it also shows that, you know, the etiquette of Salah generally. That if everyone was to speak and take a mistake out, then that can cause more confusion. And that happens sometimes in Taraweeh. If the Imam makes a mistake in the 30th juz, then the whole masjid wants to take a mistake out most time. The point being of this example, the reason I mentioned is that another benefit can also be, it shows how the Quran can never be changed as well. SubhanAllah. If anyone makes a mistake, no matter who he is, there's always somebody to correct. Anyways, the point of this is that, just for terms of understanding, we could say that it's not allowed for a person to move in Salah. It's not allowed for a person, you know, apart from the necessary actions that he needs to do, it's not allowed for a person to move. Let's say, for example, that this is a hadith, what Shaykh Huzaifa did was a hadith, for example. So then, in one side, it says that it's not allowed, and in another narration, it is saying that it is allowed. Okay? So how can we make one am and one khas? We could say, generally it's not allowed, but if there is a need, then it is allowed. So there's a particular scenario, and that's called jam'. That's we are combining between the two. Obviously, this is not a narration, what Shaykh Huzaifa did. He's not the Prophet ﷺ, obviously. I'm just mentioning it because it was something that just went viral, I think, a couple of days ago. And inshallah, I will give you more examples from Quran, Hadith, and so on. When you get to that chapter, I just wanted you to understand the concept of combining. So if you're not able to combine, only then you go to nasakh. And one of the main reasons for this is because when you combine between two, let's say a hadith, then you are acting upon both hadith. You're acting upon both. When you do nasakh and abrogate, then you're only acting upon one. You're only acting upon one. So for that reason, that step is delayed. So if we had two hadith going against one another, then if somebody came along and he said, no, this is nasikh and that's mansukh, this ruling has been abrogated, and this is a new ruling, we won't accept it straight away. We have to see, are we able to combine first or not? And if we are able to combine, then we stick to the combination. But if we are not, then that's when we will move on to the next step. So this is regarding the first condition. The second condition, so the first, he says, two evidences that cannot be combined, because if they can be, then there is no abrogation, since the possibility to act on both of them exists. You're acting upon both narrations. Right, number two is very, very important as well. Anybody who claims abrogation, then the second condition is very important, which is knowledge of the fact that the abrogating text was revealed later, known either through a text, something learned from a companion, or via history. Okay. What this basically is that we have to know the history, or we have to know the date, maybe not the exact date, but we have to know that the new ruling, which is known as nasikh, it came after the mansukh. Mansukh is the previous ruling which has now been abrogated. We have to know that the nasikh came after the mansukh. If we do not know that, how can we do nasikh? Or if it came before, how can we do nasikh? This new ruling, we have to know that it came after the previous ruling. We have to know the date. We have to know the timestamp of it, basically. So again, if somebody was to claim that this ruling is mansukh, we have to say to them, okay, what is your proof that this new ruling, this nasikh, came later? And the Sheikh mentioned 3 ways of how a person can know. He said, firstly, either known through a text. So, for example, some of the examples that we taken in the previous lesson. So when we talked about the fighting, remember it was firstly times 10, right? 20 have to fight 200, 100 have to fight 1,000. Then it was reduced to double. In the beginning of that second ayah, Allah says, Al-ana khaffafa Allahu ankum. Now Allah has made it easier for you, and this is the new ruling. So that within the text, Allah has mentioned Al-an, now, i.e., there was a previous ruling, and now there's a new ruling. Or for example, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we mentioned, Kuntu nahaytukum an ziyarati al-qubur, that I had prohibited you from visiting the graves, but now you can visit them because it reminds you of the hereafter. So that is something explicit, clearly mentioned within the text, when you text Quran and Sunnah. So that's one way of how we can know the timestamp of a narration or of the nasikh. Did it come after or did it come before? The second way that the Shaykh mentioned, something learned from a companion. Something learned from a companion. I think the Shaykh actually just mentioned examples. Okay, let's read what the Shaykh says. I think he mentions an example for each of them. He says, an example of knowledge that is known to have come later, so this is through the text, is the saying of the Prophet ﷺ, I authorize you to enjoy women through temporary marriage. Indeed, Allah has now forbidden it until the day of resurrection. So that is not allowed anymore. An example of knowledge reaching us by the way of information from a companion is the statement of Aisha radiallahu anha, who reported that it had been revealed in the Holy Quran that 10 clear breastfeedings make the marriage unlawful. Then it was abrogated and substituted by 5 breastfeedings. So we know, for example, if a child is breastfed or 2 children from different families are breastfed from the same woman, then it is, they become like brothers and sisters, so they can't get married and so on. Now the question is, how many suckles does it take for it to be considered that this person has become breastfed by that woman? So, for example, like Prophet he went to Halima Sa'adiyah in the beginning of the seerah, right? So he was breastfed by her, for example. Now, how much is it? Just if it was 1 suckle and that's it, is that khalas, it's considered that the ruling is established that she has breastfed this child, and now her children or other people who have been breastfed by her are now like brothers and sisters for the other child. How many? Is it 10? Is it 5? Is it 2? Is it 3? How many is it? One narration of Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that in the Quran, firstly it was 10, but then it was abrogated, and now it's 5. So the point being, again, we don't want to focus on the fiqh issue too much. Just an example to show that how do we know which came first? So we have one saying 10, we have another saying 5. Which one came first and which one came second? We know that the 10 came first, and later on the ruling of 5 came, meaning the 5 is the nasikh and 10 is mansukh, meaning 10 is abrogated. So we act upon 5 now, according to this narration of Aisha radiallahu anha. And how did we know this? How do we know that 10 came first and 5 came later? Through the statement of Aisha radiallahu anha, i.e. through a statement of a companion. So that answers the first 2, either through a text or something learned from a companion, or via history. History is basically, this is basically working out. Maybe, this hadith was sent after a certain incident that took place, and that this incident happened at the end of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And the first hadith was mentioned at an incident which took place in the beginning of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Or, for example, this was narrated by a companion who accepted Islam only a year before the Prophet ﷺ passed away. Whereas the other hadith was mentioned by a companion who passed away in Makkah. So obviously the Sahabi who narrated it in time of Makkah, obviously came first, and the one who only accepted Islam a year before the death of Prophet, his narration came later. So things like that. Let's read what the Shaykh says. He says, an example of knowledge garnered through history occurs in the saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Most High, now Allah has lightened the burden from you. Okay, yeah, so this you could say is from history, because in this ayah Allah is saying now. So we know when that ayah was revealed. So that shows we know the time of when this ayah was revealed through history, because this was talking about Battle of Badr. The Sheikh, he says, the word now indicates that this ruling is the latter of whatever preceded it of the same issue. Similarly, if it was stated that the Prophet ﷺ gave a ruling for something before migration, and then gave another ruling which a ruling after that which opposed the first, then the second one would be counted as the abrogating one. The second is the nasikh, and the one before hijrah is mansukh. So this is all regarding, these are three different ways that we can know the history or the timestamp of the nasikh, and this is regarding the second condition. The first condition is that we can't do jam', and the second condition is that the nasikh we have to know that the nasikh came after the mansukh. The third is validating the abrogating text, meaning making sure that the nasikh, the one that came, the newer one, is something which is authentically established. Is something which is authentically established. The majority has stipulated the abrogating text be stronger than what it is abrogating to, or at least similar. Therefore, the mutawatir, the narration that has multiple narrators, would not be abrogated by narrations that are ahad, narrations that have a single narrator at each level of a chain, even if it is established as a correct narration. What is most correct is that it did not be stipulated whether or not the abrogating text be stronger or similar. Reason being, the purpose of abrogation is the ruling, and so it should not require it to be mutawatir for it to take place. Okay, an extension of validating, and this is why the word in Arabic, the word thubut is used and not the word sihha, the authenticity, is because this is an issue that ulama differ in, and the Shaykh kind of indicated towards it, that does the nasikh, I'm going to stick to the Arabic words now, inshallah you should have got used to the Arabic words. I'm going to say one more time, the nasikh is the new ruling. The nasikh is the new ruling. So the issue is, does the nasikh have to be stronger or similar in strength to the mansukh? Does the nasikh have to be stronger or similar in strength to the mansukh? What we mean in strength, we mean, for example, if it's the Quran, then another ayah from the Quran, they're both the same. Okay? They're both strong. And this is one of the main issues what the Shaykh mentioned, is we have those narrations which are considered mutawatir and those which are considered ahad. Now, I have kind of talked about it quickly previously and given you a general understanding of this when I was in Kuwait. And we are going to take this a bit more detail today, inshallah, in the next chapter. But mutawatir, just for quick understanding, those narrations which have a lot of narrators or multiple narrators in each level. Okay, so it's been narrated by 20 Sahabi and 10 and 15 tabi'is and 50 tabi'is, for example. Whereas khabar ahad is where there's only one or two. So in simple terms, so there's only one Sahabi, 2, 3 the tabi'is, 1 tabi', and so on. Okay. Now, even though in terms of authenticity, it doesn't matter whether it's mutawatir or ahad. Okay, it doesn't affect the authenticity. Yes, mutawatir is strong, is more authentic. We're going to get to that, inshallah, generally. But it doesn't necessarily mean that just because something is ahad, it's weak. But which one's stronger? Without doubt, mutawatir is stronger. Because there's so many people narrating it, how can it be a lie? And how can, they make a mistake if so many people are narrating it? So now if you have two ahadith, and the mansukh in this scenario is mutawatir, and the nasikh is ahad, then can the nasikh, in this scenario, these two ahadith, can then the nasikh, which is ahad, actually do naskh and actually abrogate that which is mansukh, because the mansukh is stronger? So this is a issue in Usool al-Fiqh that they study, that can that actually take place? So if you go back to the question, does the nasikh have to be stronger or at least the same as the mansukh? Then the majority of the ulama from the Usooliyun, they say yes. they say they say yes, it does. Okay, and the reason they say this is because it's this the understanding behind it is that it's a rafa. Rafa means you're removing the ruling in totality. You're not just specifying it or doing something simple. You're removing the ruling in totality. So it can only be removed by something as strong or stronger by that which it was established by in the first place. Okay. So their understanding is that because naskh is a complete removal of a ruling, it can only be removed by something similar in strength or stronger than how it was established in the first place. However, other usuliyun, and from them the author, so Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, his opinion is that no, it's not. That's not a condition. It's not a condition, because as long as it is authentic, we can act upon it. And that's why mutawatir ahad, that doesn't really affect the authenticity of a ruling. I want to talk a bit more about mutawatir and ahad later on. Hopefully that makes sense. Are there any questions? Let's see. Sheikh, we have an audio issue. Just wait a minute, please. Okay. Okay. Somebody's knocked on my door anyway. Whilst you sort out the audio issue, let me just see who's at the door. Is the audio issue sorted now? For those who are on Zoom, can you hear me clearly? Or is the issue just is it in Zoom or is it in the center? Okay, so those on Zoom can hear me clearly, okay.
So, next should unlock.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Is everything sorted now? Yeah. Alhamdulillah. So can I carry on? Just a minute. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So what's the last thing that you've heard exactly? You'll hear from the mobile internet. Okay. What's the last thing that you guys heard? The whole point number 3, or just talking about the issue, or which part exactly? Nasikh has to be strong. Okay. It could become to an issue here, which is that does the nasikh have to be stronger or similar in strength to the mansukh? And one of the biggest examples of that is mutawatir and ahad. Mutawatir is basically a hadith where in each of the levels there are multiple narrators, whereas ahad is only 1 or 2 or 3, very small number, and is normally referred to as one person. But we'll get to different types of ahad in the next chapter, inshallah. So if you were to have 2 ahadith, and the hadith that came first was mutawatir, and then the hadith that came later was ahad, can we use the new hadith, which is ahad, to naskh of the previous one, which is mutawatir? And the majority of the usuliyun, the ulama usul, they say yes, this is a condition that it has to be stronger. And their reasoning for that is because naskh is a removal of the whole ruling. It's a removal. It's not just specifying a ruling or restricting a ruling or giving an exception to a ruling. You're actually removing the whole ruling. So for that reason, you could only remove that ruling with that which is in either has similar in strength or is stronger than the either similar in strength or stronger than how the ruling was established. So because it was established as mutawatir, then the nasikh has to be mutawatir, and it can't be weaker, which is ahad. Or if it was ahad, then if it's mutawatir, that's fine. If it's the other way around, mutawatir is stronger, so that's fine. But in this scenario, can ahad do naskh of mutawatir? Now the majority would say no, because mutawatir is stronger and the nasikh is weaker. However, some usuliyun, and from them the author, Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he says no, that's not a condition. As long as it is authentic, then we accept it, and it can do naskh, and it can do naskh. And we will talk a bit more about mutawatir and ahad in the next chapter, inshallah. So this is regarding the 3 conditions of abrogation. Are there any questions regarding these 3 conditions? If there is a question, you can just type yes, so I know, and then you can type the question later. But can you give me host? Oh. There's a question. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Jazakallah khair for the session. Just a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay. Sheikh, you mentioned regarding if it's a statement in the Quran, so to abrogate, it should be from a statement in the Quran itself. So there are two statements, one abrogates the other one. But I didn't catch whether it's possible to abrogate from a hadith. And if so, what are the conditions?
We're going to talk about that in a little while, in about 5 minutes. We're going to talk about
another.
Yeah.
Another question is that if there are, let's say, for example, there is a hadith. Let's say there is no hadith. If I take an example, let's say wiping the face after dua. Let's say there is no hadith, authentic hadith, proving that you can wipe your face. But on the other hand, some scholars accept the fact that there are many hadith which are either weak or fabricated hadith. But there are many of those. So they reconcile amongst them and say that it's possible. So if you put these two, how do we come to a conclusion?
So let's look. If you look at this from the Usool al-Fiqh perspective, so you're saying on one side there are many weaker hadith. Okay, on one side, I'm just going to base it off what you said. So on one side we say there are many weaker hadith. On the other side, what do we have?
We have no authentic hadith saying that you can wipe your face.
So the only thing that we have regarding wiping the face is a few weaker hadith, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so where's the naskh where's the abrogation in this scenario?
Okay.
Because there is nothing proof already.
Okay.
Which we are abrogating.
So the proof is that there is no hadith proving that you can wipe means you cannot wipe. So, but others say that there are weak hadith, so we can wipe. Can you take it like that?
So you're saying that there is no hadith to prove that we should wipe? No, I think look, a better way of saying it is that we have so many hadith of Prophet where he made dua and in none of them he wiped. Okay, that in none of them he wiped. And then on the other side, we have some weaker hadith that show that he did. So this, you wouldn't really call it naskh because do we know the tarikh, the date, which one came first, which one came later?
No, from my side, I cannot say that, but it's just a ruling that I heard that some scholars accept. Yeah.
That's fine. Like I said, because it's Usool al-Fiqh, I don't want to go into the fiqh side of it. I'm not going to give an answer on that. Okay. Yeah. Right now, I just want to focus on the Usool al-Fiqh perspective because right now the most important thing I want from you guys is not to know the fiqh answers of every single issue because that's not going to happen. I need you to understand the Usool al-Fiqh process behind giving a fiqh answer. So we're on the chapter of naskh. So how do we deal with this? That in all the authentic hadith, person did not wipe his face, but there are some weak ones. Okay, so how do we deal with that now? Because we're on the chapter of naskh, I'm going to stick to this. Can we do abrogation in this hadith? We can't because we don't know the date. We don't know the date. And even if we did know the date, if we did, let's say later on, let's say we knew that in the beginning, the Prophet never wiped it, for argument's sake, okay? In the beginning, the Prophet did not wipe his face, and later on he did, but they are weak. Then because he said there are many, there's a number of issues now. If there are many ahadith which are weak, then we're going to talk about some of the types of hadith that it could go up to Hasan. I'm not saying it is in this issue. I'm trying to just make you guys think of the process. Okay, because if it's Hasan, then that's something which is accepted as type of maqbool. But if it sticks to being weak, then if we say it is naskh, then we can't. Because I mean, it goes back to this issue now, right? So if authentically the person never did it, and there's weaker hadith, and if we say that in naskh it has to be stronger, then no, we can't, because obviously weak hadith is a lot weaker than Well, it's not even established. It's not even established in the first place. Never mind being stronger. Okay, but then one could argue that it's not nasakh and it's something else. Looking at some of the other chapters of Usool al-Fiqh, then if that is the case, then we look at the other chapters, but we're not on that chapter, so I don't want to go into that at the moment. Inshallah, does that answer your question?
Yes. Jazakallah khair. Sheikh, one last question. Just wanted to understand how the hadith and fiqh comes into consideration, or how this both can come into consideration. Meaning, if something that Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has done, how can we update the rulings on it? Like, I just wanted to understand.
How can we what, sorry?
If something has been followed by Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, how can we update? Meaning, how does the hadith and fiqh, what is the correlation between both of them?
The correlation between hadith and fiqh.
Yes.
Okay, so we have the hadith and likewise the Quran, and from there we extract the rulings. So a person did something, okay. Now using usul al-fiqh, so we have three things basically. We have the proof, then the second is the process, which is usul al-fiqh, and thirdly we have the ruling. So let's say we take a hadith. The Prophet ﷺ, for example, he said, إِذَا قُمْتَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَكَبِّرْ. When you get up to pray, then say the takbir, okay, and say Allahu Akbar, okay. That is the hadith. The usul al-fiqh process is that this is a commandment, so a commandment shows that it's obligatory. So then now we come to the ruling, which is the fiqh. This is fiqh. The ruling is the fiqh. So the fiqh ruling is that it's obligatory to start the salah with takbir. So
got the answer. Meaning we can't change the hadith, but we can change the fiqh rulings.
I wouldn't say we can change the fiqh rulings, but
it can be changed. And it can be updated with the new rulings.
Yeah, you can say that. Yeah, in terms of naskh and stuff, it can be updated. We're going to talk about some of the wisdom. Why would it change? Why would a certain ruling be something in the beginning of Islam, or why would the person change it? Or why did Allah change it later? We're going to talk about that as well.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh.
Okay, right. Okay, we've got a lot to take. So, okay, I think we have about 5 minutes, right? In the next 5 minutes, we need to finish off this chapter, inshallah, because we really need to finish naskh before Salat al-Isha, because I think Adhan al-Isha is at 5 past, right, for you guys. Right. So now we're on the aqsam and naskh, the different types of naskh. Here they translated it as parts of abrogation. A better translation would be aqsam, types of abrogation. Now these are the types of abrogation looking at it from the text, from the aspect of the text which has been abrogated. The text which has been abrogated. So these are of 3 types. These are all 3 types. The first type of naskh is the main one, when the ruling has been abrogated and the wording remains. Meaning, there's a ruling, we have a certain hadith, and then later on another hadith or another ayah, okay, comes saying that we don't use the previous ruling anymore, and now we move on to the next ruling. And then the ayahs in the Quran, and we still recite the ayah. So for example, there's all of this, just for the time, I'm not going to read it, but it's basically the same ayah that we mentioned before, that in fighting is 20 to 200 and so on, and now it's been reduced to 100 to 200, okay? So this ayah number 65 is the first ruling, and then ayah number 66 is the new ruling, okay? Somebody may ask, if a new ruling has come, why do we still keep the old ruling in the Quran? Yeah, if a new ruling has come, why is the old ruling still in the Quran? Won't people get confused or whatever it may be? The Shaykh mentions a number of wisdoms behind it. The first wisdom that the Shaykh mentions is, and the wisdom of abrogating the ruling, and not the verse, i.e. not the ayah, is to allow the reward of recitation or reciting it to remain. So the first wisdom is that when you recite, you get rewarded for that. So just the fact that you're reciting the ayah, because if you take the ayah out, then that's one less ayah to read now. Okay, and we know that for every letter that we recite, we get 10 hasanat and so on. So the first wisdom is that you are able to gain more reward by reciting. The second, the Shaykh mentions, is a reminder to the Muslim nation of the wisdom of abrogation. Okay, so this shows the wisdom, because if the ayah wasn't there, people wouldn't really know that it has been abrogated. First it was harder, and Allah made it easier. Okay, so this is something which, you could say a consequence of the second benefit is that this also leads a person to doing shukr. And he thanks Allah that even though it was made difficult first, Allah made it easier for us later. So this is regarding the first one, which is the most straightforward one, that we have, let's say, 2 ayat. And the first ayah was the previous ruling. The second ayah is a new ruling. And we still recite them in the Quran. And the reason it remains is so that we can gain the reward of reciting. And number 2, so that we can also we can acknowledge the process of a nasakh, abrogation. Right. The second and third one, it gets a bit interesting if you've not heard it before. And the second is when the wording has been abrogated, but the ruling remains. When the wording has been abrogated, but the ruling remains. What this basically means is that there was an ayah that came with a certain ruling. There was an ayah that came with a certain ruling. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed the ayah, meaning the ayah we don't recite in the Quran anymore. The ayah we don't recite in the Quran anymore. The Prophet when he recited the Quran towards the end of his life, the Prophet did not repeat the ayah. So that ayah, Allah removed it from the Quran, and it's not part of the Quran, because Allah can do what He wills, right? So it's not part of the Quran. But the ruling, it remains. We still have to act upon the ruling that the ayah came with. So we don't recite the wording, but we still act upon the meaning. And he says, such as the verse of stoning, where indeed it has been established in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim from the narration of Ibn Abbas of Umar radiallahu anhu said, the verse of stoning was amongst the other verses that Allah revealed in the Quran. So we read it and understood it properly, and the Prophet stoned and been stoned after him. But I fear after the passing of time, or a passing of time, people will come to say, by Allah, we do not find the verse of stoning in the book of Allah. So they will become misguided by leaving an obligation that Allah has revealed, even though stoning is in the book of Allah, a right on those that commit fornication, adultery from the chaste men and women, and if the evidence is established, the pregnant woman, the woman is pregnant, or if there is an acknowledgement. In other words, Umar is saying that the ayah of stoning was something revealed, we understood it, we memorized it, and the Prophet acted upon it, but we don't recite it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He decided to remove it from the Quran that we have left. Obviously, Allah can speak with what He wills, and it's His Quran, but Allah has decided that ayah, even though Allah brought it down, He has decided to take it back. Okay, He has decided to take it back. And it has been narrated that the ayah was وَالشَّيْخُ وَالشَّيْخَةُ إِذَا زَنَيَا فَرْجُوهُمَا الْبَتَّةِ وَالشَّيْخُ وَالشَّيْخَةُ إِذَا زَنَيَا فَرْجُوهُمَا الْبَتَّةِ. It's narrated that was the ayah. Okay, and some ulama say that wasn't the actual ayah, that's just the meaning of the ayah. It's mentioned by Umar. Umar mentioned this, Umar radiallahu anhu, he mentioned this wording, and some ulama say that Umar mentioned that wording, but it wasn't the exact wording, just the meaning. Ala kulli hal, that's a different issue. The point being is that this ayah, وَالشَّيْخُ وَالشَّيْخَةُ إِذَا زَنَيَا فَرْجُوهُمَا الْبَتَّةِ, was an ayah which was revealed, and now is no longer there. Okay, but we still act upon it, as we can see by the statement of Umar, which is narrated in Bukhari and Muslim, and the Prophet ﷺ also did that. Now, somebody may ask the question, what's the point? Isn't that confusing? Isn't that confusing? Is that the ruling remains, but you take the ayah away? Okay, so the Sheikh mentions the wisdom behind it, and the Sheikh, he says, the wisdom of abrogating the wording, but not the ruling, is to test the ummah. It's a test to see if they will act upon something that is not in the Quran and fulfilling their belief in Allah, in what Allah has revealed. And if you notice, and subhanAllah, this part is very profound, the exact opposite of the state of the Jews that tried to hide the verse of stoning in the Torah. Because to summarize the story, something happened. Jews had committed the fornication, and when they came to the Prophet for a ruling, they had the exact same ruling in the Torah, but when they came, and the Prophet, he said it's the same ruling, they tried covering it with their hands. Okay, so the Jews didn't accept this ruling of stoning. So it's like a test for the Muslims that, okay, this ayah was revealed, and it's no longer there, but we still have to act upon it. The Prophet still acted upon it, and the companions still acted upon it. So do you still do it, or do you be like the Jews that you reject this ayah? And the third type The third type is what has been abrogated both in wording and ruling. So this is an ayah which has been revealed, but the ayah has been removed, no longer in the Quran, and also the ruling as well. We don't act upon that ruling. We don't act upon that ruling anymore, such as the statement of Aisha that we mentioned previously regarding breastfeeding, such as the abrogation of the 10 breastfeedings as in the previous narration of Aisha. So that narration with 10 is not found in the Quran now. And we don't act upon that ruling anymore. As you mentioned, Aisha said herself, it is mansukh. Okay? And somebody may ask, what is the wisdom? The Sheikh didn't actually mention the wisdom here, but we will mention the wisdom right at the end of, the Sheikh mentions a number of wisdoms at the end of the chapter. The next part we can quickly just read. It's quite straightforward. Abrogation is divided into 4 categories with regards to the abrogating text. As for questions, we'll take in the beginning of next session. I know Adhan's going off right now, but let's quickly give me 2-3 minutes and we'll finish this chapter, inshallah. This was in regards to, we split it into 3 types, naskh, from the angle of the mansukh, looking at what has been abrogated. So either the wordings abrogated or the rulings abrogated or both and so on. Now we are going to look at it from the aspect of the nasikh. Previous one was mansukh, and now we're looking at the nasikh. And this is 4 types. Abrogation of the Quran by the Quran. Like the verses of patience mentioned above, you know, the ayah of Al-Ana Khaffaf Allah, that it was 20 and then 200 and so on. That's Quran by Quran. Abrogation of the Quran by the Sunnah. I have not found a proper example for this. Can an ayah in the Quran be made mansukh with a hadith? And so our brother asked about this. Now, firstly, and this shows the truthfulness and the fiqh of the Sheikh didn't say that there is no example. The Sheikh, I couldn't find an example. The Sheikh said, I could not find an example of naskh. We're not talking about explaining a ruling or specifying a ruling or restricting a ruling. Okay, we're not talking about any of them. We're talking about naskh, removing a full ruling. Okay, and there is a bit of khilaf, but the opinion of Imam Shafi'i, and also the more famous opinion of Imam Ahmad, and also the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah, is that this cannot take place. This cannot take place. The opinion of Imam Shafi'i and the famous opinion of Imam Ahmad, and also the opinion of Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, is that this cannot take place because this shows ta'zeem of the Quran, venerating the speech of Allah. This is the speech of Allah, and it shouldn't be abrogated by a speech of creation, even though it is revelation. But there's a big difference between the speech of Allah and the speech of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Ibn Taymiyyah also, he mentions that even those ulama that might have mentioned an example, or this is naskh, he says that they're actually mistaken, and it gives different explanations for them. He gives different explanations for them. The third one, abrogation of the Sunnah by the Quran, an example of which is abrogation of facing the sacred house in Jerusalem, which was established by the Sunnah, to facing the Kaaba, which in turn established by the saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Most High. And he mentions the ayah. This is where the Muslims in the beginning of Islam were facing Masjid al-Aqsa for Salah, which is something established by the Sunnah. And then later on, an ayah in the Quran that came down saying, commanding the Muslims, don't face Jerusalem anymore. Now you have to face the Kaaba. So this was naskh, the changing of the Qibla. This was naskh. And the majority of the ulama say that this can take place. This is a clear example of that. And then the last one is abrogation of the Sunnah by the Sunnah. A hadith with another hadith. An example of which is saying, for Islam, I had forbidden you from drinking nabiz. Nabiz is a type of, it's water you put in dates, you leave it for some time, and then it intoxicates you. In the vessels made out of leather, but now you may drink in all vessels, but do not drink intoxicants. Another hadith is, I prohibited you from visiting the graves, but now you may visit it, and so on. So that's Sunnah with a Sunnah, hadith with a hadith. Now, obviously, within this, you can go into more detail and talk about mutawatir and ahad, like we did previously. But we'll stop here, inshallah, because I know it's time for Salah. And after Salah, we'll just read the wisdoms of abrogation. Some of the wisdoms the Shaykh mentions. It's not difficult, but inshallah, we'll continue from here, inshallah. So we'll take a break now, inshallah, half an hour break. We'll start again at 6:40, inshallah. So I do urge all of them, all the brothers are going for salah as well to, hurry after salah. Don't stand around talking and so on. We'll stop for now. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. And any questions I'll take in the beginning of the next session, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. We'll end this session and we'll start a new session because we have also scheduled it on YouTube. So inshallah, after half an hour, we'll start a new session and they can join with the same Zoom meeting ID, inshallah, the brothers and sisters.
That's fine, inshallah. That's fine.
Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.